I could have bought a house. Instead, I spent it all making the 2000s-style comedies that Hollywood refuses to make. I wasn't allowed to watch R-rated movies growing up, and so my passion for them really grew in 2020 at the age of 21. I would watch an R-rated comedy every single night, whether it was Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Dazed and Confused, American Pie, Wedding Crashers, Role Models, or Euro Trip. And then I noticed something. Hollywood just completely stopped making them. I could have sat back and just let the comedy movie genre die, or I could put my money where my passion is. So I threw away the thought of buying a house, and I dove in. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? Well, staying up until 4 a.m. trying to recast an actress due to a flight cancellation the day before production, having the police called on my set, and of course a whole lot of money on the line. That's when the idea really came to be that I wanted to bring these movies back. And, I came up with the idea of I wanted to accumulate $100,000 and pay someone to make a 2000 style comedy for me. Doubt started to creep in because it was like, what if I don't like this movie and I just accumulate $100,000? Who knows how long that would take to accumulate? And, I think it was when I watched Clerks by Kevin Smith where the thought came to be that, maybe I could just make this movie myself. It was from there that I did research, and I found people all the time were making these movies for $10,000 to $50,000, and I watched a ton of them, and, a lot of them came out really great. I was really shocked at what you could do for this much money. I watched every single YouTube video that a micro-budget filmmaker spoke on, or any how-to tutorials. I read every article possible. I bought some books, listened to every podcast. I was just completely consumed. I had a colleague who, one of his friends that he was roommates with back in college, I knew was in the studio system. He worked at Universal. And I asked, is there any way I could get in contact with him? And my colleague reached out to him, and, he was very welcoming, and he was totally let's get on the phone. And we talked for 3 hours, and he was so generous with his time. I had the most basic questions possible that I couldn't find simple answers to on the internet. How do you get sound for a movie? I know you don't get it from the camera, but how does that work? Where do you record the sound into? Where does the sound come from? Where do you find actors? He just answered everything, and after those 3 hours, I just felt so much better, and I had an idea of how everything was going to come to be. And it was from there that I purchased Judd Apatow's masterclass. He was the maker of The 40-Year-Old Virgin, This Is 40, Knocked Up, all of these great comedies. He had such a huge hand in all of these great 2000s comedies, but he was making all the sorts of movies that I wanted to make. This is the summer of 2022. I had the plan of shooting in the summer of 2023. I got done with my first draft of the screenplay the summer of 2022, and it was just garbage. I submitted it to a couple of coverage services. I reached out to every screenwriter I could get a hold of, just figuring out what is wrong with this screenplay, how do you fix it. I had, 9 months or less before I wanted to start filming. January of 2023 comes in, and I sent out a casting call and crew call to all of the local universities and on the casting website Backstage. And the auditions rolled in, and the crew positions rolled in, and I was so impressed with the caliber of actor and the caliber of crew member that I had the potential to work with. Rosetta Stone takes place at the school and a few houses, and so I went ahead and I went on Facebook and Nextdoor, reached out to a local school, and I locked down all of these locations. April of 2023, we do the table read for Rosetta Stone, and 2 of the cast members just completely ghosted me. They did not show up, and now I need to recast these roles. But we did, and the 2 actors that filled in, honestly, I think they did a lot better job than the other 2 would have. Actually, there was one final role that I had to cast, a really small role. I decided to take the role on myself, but I took it very seriously, and I hired an acting coach on Upwork, who would be Brendan Takish, who ended up becoming the editor on this film, and flashing forward a little bit of a spoiler, he would end up becoming the producer on my next feature. June 10th. 2023. This would be the first day of production on Rosetta Stone. This is the day we're finally getting started. This was an 8-day shoot, which is insane. I mean, most Hollywood movies are shot in 30 to 90 days. On our 3rd day of shooting, it started raining. We were supposed to be shooting outside that day, and we had to completely move the days around. So we're shooting on Saturdays and Sundays. So we had to shoot Sunday scenes on Saturday and Saturday scenes on Sunday. Huge kudos to the cast on being prepared to do this. They actually were completely off book for those scenes as well. So we were able to make that happen. Another problem we ran into was for 4 of the days we were at the school that we shot at. And, I rented this location like 6 months in advance, and I had constant dialogue with the location manager. We show up at 11 a.m., no one's there. Every door's locked. I had no idea what to do. We were promised the location would be there for us. There would be a custodian to let us in. It really threw things for a whirl. And, I just didn't know what to do. I called the location manager 100 times. I called every contact I could have. And thankfully, a couple hours later, she responded and we were indoors. We were way behind. And by the end of the day, somehow we made it work. So I would say I worked with about 30 different people on this production. And, off the top of my head, I would say probably 25, 26, somewhere in that range, were just amazing. There were a few people who were really unprofessional and caused some tension on set. And, that was a big lesson I learned for the second go around, that you need to do more interviewing and ask more specific questions. And, it was just a learning experience. There were just a few people who would lose their patience and just engage in all sorts of unprofessional behavior. I can say by the end of the shoot that I was honestly relieved. We got everything I needed, but there was always just this constant tension. And, it was really unfortunate that once I called cut the final time, it was thank goodness. And, I was just happy to be done. And that was really unfortunate because things started out so well and it was so much fun. And then, by day 3, day 4, all the way into day 8, it was just there was some real tension. Yeah, that movie was called Rosetta Stoned. And it was about a stoner who gets his autistic classmate high in exchange for homework help and then realizes he's in more than he bargained for when his classmate makes advances at friendship. If you want to sign up to my email list, which is hometownsummer.com, which is actually the title of my second movie, I'm going to be posting that link in the description and in the pinned comment. If you want to sign up, I will send you a link to Rosetta Stone that you can watch for free. But yeah, so Brendan cut the movie together in 6 months. Very collaborative process between him and I, and we had our premiere 6 months later at the Michigan Theater in Ann Arbor, Michigan, where the movie was shot. It was just such a surreal event. It was so cool. We had an audience of about 120 to 130 people, and it was just a really good time. And I wasted no time putting it on streaming. The movie completely tanked. I lost just about everything. I spent $30,000 on Rosetta Stone and $30,000 on Hometown Summer. Lessons learned. I learned that you really need a marketing plan, and you should be advertising this movie well in advance of its release date. You should be advertising for 12 to 18 months before the movie's released. You should start advertising it before you even start shooting it. I lost the money, but I followed through on my passion, and I'm never going to regret that. I would have regret not making the movie. I learned so much about the filmmaking process and about comedy through making Rosetta Stoned. I was just itching so much. I could not let up. I had to have a second crack at it, and I had to assemble a cast and crew and get everything together where I knew there was going to be just an amazing on-set environment, to the point where we would wrap filming and it wouldn't be a sigh of relief. It would be that was a lot of fun. And so I wasted no time. I started writing the first draft of Hometown Summer less than a week after production on Rosetta Stone wrapped. And like Rosetta Stone, the first draft wasn't perfect, but I would say with the first draft of Hometown Summer, I was near where I was at from a quality level of the final draft of Rosetta Stone. I went ahead and I did rewrite the script about 10 times again, but I think I got just such a much better story and a much better product and slightly more meaningful altogether. From there, I just took the same steps I took with Rosetta Stone with assembling a cast and crew, and it went a lot smoother this time. No one ghosted me. We did a longer rehearsal process, and that was all great. And, production was a lot of fun. But we did run into some unique problems that we didn't run into on the Rosetta Stone set, as I teased in the beginning. Day 1 on set, we were filming an outdoor scene, roughly 8 p.m. on a Saturday. The neighbors came up, and they walk up, they watch the take, back to their back porch, the second I call cut. They're not being the most considerate people, but, not everyone's around movies all the time. Especially in Michigan, movies are rarely made. Next take happens, and this time they don't leave. And they're like, who are you? What are you doing? We're shooting a movie. And they're like, okay, well, you can't do that. That's illegal. And I was like, what? I have this location rented. And they're like, yeah, you can't shoot a movie here. Like, it's against the law. And this was towards the end of a shoot date. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So I go inside and I call the realtor that I rented the house from. And like, I was scared. Like, this was day 1 of 10. This was day 1 of 6 at this house. And I was like, are we getting shut down? Like, I don't have much more than $30,000 plus a few months living expenses in the bank. I can't afford to lose the shoot date. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And she doesn't answer the phone. And I'm like, oh shit. And she calls me back. And she's like, what's going on? I explain what's going on. And to my relief, she's like, oh, these people are crazy. They do this to everyone that rents my house. So then I go outside and now there is a larger crowd. Head of the neighborhood HOAs there now. And she's like, you can't film this. This is illegal. I was like, I just talked to the realtor. And they're like, no, we're calling the police. This is just such a huge commotion. Like, you cannot film a movie with all this going on in the background. By now it's about 9 o'clock. We're supposed to wrap at about 10:30. And it's like, okay. Ironically, the police never showed up. And as I learned later that night, one, what we were doing was not illegal. We weren't breaking any civil codes either, but the police will not show up to a civil matter. Thankfully, long story short, we came back the next day, no problems whatsoever. Before the third day of filming, the day the internet shut down, there were just flight cancellations galore. And I found out about 12 hours before I got to set that day that Brendan, my editor and co-producer on this film, was supposed to be playing one of the bit roles, the role of the Uber driver, and his flight got canceled. There's no other solution but for me to fill in, and he gave me a million tips, and, we rehearsed the hell out of the scene, and yeah, I ended up playing the Uber driver, and that worked out well, but, we got another flight cancellation the day before our last day of filming. The actress who plays Echo, her flight got canceled due to tropical storms, so I was up until 4 a.m. trying to find an actress to fill the role for her, but thankfully when I woke up, I got a response to a text message, and Sarah ended up filling in for the role of Echo, and, she did an amazing job. She had, maybe a half hour to prepare for the role, and you would never know. And this is an unfinished story at this point. We're about a few months away from the official premiere of Hometown Summer. And Hometown Summer tells the story of 3 childhood best friends whose plan to attend the same college is thrown for a whirl throughout a crazy summer filled with drugs, sex, and bad business decisions. And we almost have the final edit on this. And, I'm just super pumped this time around to, go and do another premiere at the Michigan Theater in Ann Arbor. And honestly, I already have the bug to make my 3rd one. And now that you know my story, you might be thinking, what even did happen to these great comedy movies? Because if you're like me, these are some of your favorite all-time movies, and they really shaped your sense of humor. And I took a deep dive into what did happen to these movies, and also found some good news along the way about some potentially great under-the-radar comedies, including one starring Vince Vaughn and Ryan Reynolds. And you can check out my deep dive here.